All right. Well, this is Jeff Roble. I'm the applications engineer for Spectrum Controls, and we're going to cover two products today: the InView comms and also the web port. So the first half we'll take a quick look at the InView comms module, and shortly thereafter we'll open it for questions. I'll mute everybody during the WebEx, and then open it for questions after we finish the first section, and then we'll move on to the second. So let me start out by just popping up the screen here and basically describing what we have here. So we're going to be using a P72C InView, which is the third one down on the screen here. And it's basically tied back to an L73 processor here that I have in the lab. And so we're going to start here. Let me just mute everybody real quick here. If for any reason my audio or video drops out, just send me a chat and I'll take care of it. Okay. So first of all, the InView comms is going to come with a quick start guide that'll guide you through the wiring. The comms module and the display are sold separately, so the Ethernet IP comms module, once installed, and you follow the quick start guide, it goes through all of the wiring for the serial interface between the display and the comms module, and as well as the Ethernet settings, and gets you started as far as connecting to the comms module via your web browser. Now, one of the benefits with the new comms module is there's no longer a need for any special software package. It's actually all embedded in the device, so you won't have to worry about having the latest version of software. There is no software. So with that said, we'll go ahead and go to the comms module user interface for the display. So I'm going to switch over to that. And it's on the network on the 10.0.0.231 here. And the first thing the user would do would be to log in, of course. So let me do that. And once we get inside the display here, we'll cover the configuration settings. The first thing the user is going to want to do is change their network settings to match their PLC network. So I just wait for it here to come up. Okay, that's nice. Okay. Okay, so now the first thing the user is going to want to do is go to the network settings. So they would click on the network button. There's two Ethernet ports on the comms module, but the secondary port, the Ethernet 2 port, is basically reserved for future functions that we have yet to turn on. So in most cases, the user's only going to need the use of Ethernet 1. But down the road, when we add these additional features, the user can, of course, do a firmware upgrade on the box. And I'll show you where you can do that here shortly. But for now, the Ethernet 2 port is not used. So here you can see I have it set to my network. The web port is actually, or excuse me, the InView comms is actually behind a gateway device. So you'll notice that the address of the InView comms is different than the address we typed into the browser, and that's because it's behind a gateway. So so once the configuration or network settings are configured, the next step would be, of course, to set up the message server, in this case, the PLC communication. So we'll go to the PLC settings here. And again, we're communicating with the L73 processor. So I have it set for control logics. The processor's at this 10.0.0.239 address. TCP port, this should probably never change, at least in the case of a Rockwell processor. It's in slot 0, and we can actually test the connection ahead of time to make sure that we can get to the controller. Basically does a ping test and tells us that it's available. So I'm going to go ahead and actually establish the connection between the controller and the comms module. And basically, the way the comms module communicates with the controller is by two tag arrays. There's an array for actually triggering the messages that are displayed on the screen, and there's an array for triggering variables that are embedded in messages. Basically, on the controller side, we use add-on instructions to create an ASCII string in the native language that the sign understands. Now, in the very near future, within the next 3 or 4 weeks, we will be adding an additional feature to the comms module, which we call easy tags. And that will basically remove all of the heavy lifting from the controller. So there will be no need for the add-on instructions. Instead, we will just have a block of tags, and the tags would be very simple. And in fact, we will even give the user the ability to import a CSV file with those tag names, so they don't have to recreate them on the controller side. They'll just import the CSV file, it'll populate the tags, and very quickly they can be up and running. Now don't get me wrong, the add-on instructions, we've already kind of done all the work for the user anyways, but it's just one extra step that they have to go through. They have to make sure that they install those add-on instructions, and of course they're downloadable from our website, but again, in the near future, that feature will not be necessary anymore. We'll be able to use just the easy tag option, or we're not going to remove it completely, because we do realize that we have customers that still are doing the tags the legacy way, using the add-on instructions. So we'll support both methods, so it's backward compatible. Okay, next, after getting the message server, maybe what I should do is quickly go back to or pull up the PLC. Here you could see the add-on instructions that I have. This one here is for actually triggering messages. Again, these instructions can be downloaded from our website. As you can see, the logic is pretty simple once the instructions are dropped in. Basically, we change the message number here to whatever message we want, and the message is displayed on the screen. If we look at the actual string values that are being pushed up, again, these are the message array and the variable array. We look at those, and we look at them in ASCII. You can see that it's in the native language that the sign communicates. So the $14 is kind of like a preamble, and the 1 is the message we're triggering, and then the backslash, and the 1 is the serial address of the sign, and then we end the string with the carriage return. So when we add the easy tag capability, all of this will disappear, and we'll just need to only pass the message that we want to display and hit a trigger to trigger the message. Okay, so now let me go back to the comms module again here. So once the message server is configured, the next step that the user is going to want to do is go in and actually add their display. So we have a P72. I've already added it here, but it's basically you give the display a name, and you select the display from a list of display options here. So this is all of the InView display options that we have available today. And since we're working with a P72C, obviously that's the one I selected. The serial address that the sign is communicating with the comms module is serial address 1. The heartbeat is actually a function of the sign, where if we were to turn that on, in order for the sign to not display a message that that communication's been lost, the PLC will have to constantly send a heartbeat signal to the sign. So, but in most cases, users don't use that because the communication, as far as the comms module to the sign, is only one direction. We only write to the sign. The sign does not respond in any way. So that's the whole idea around the heartbeat. Now if we go in, and once the display is configured, at that point we can go to the display manager, or excuse me, the message group manager, and this allows us to create various message groups. Now typically the comms module will be installed only on one sign, but if, for example, you had multiple signs that were connected via RS-485, then it would make sense that you would have all of these different message groups, and you can actually download them to the signs based on their serial address, or do a broadcast to all signs if they're all the same. An example would be, if you had two signs that were back to back to each other, it would be very common for them both to be on the same comms module communicating RS-485 to the comms module. So for this WebEx, I created a message group called Training. And here you can see the messages that I have already previously created. And if we just simply click on it, we can go right to the message editor. And we can see the message. Now, we liked the old IMS software. One thing we did like about it was the editor. So we tried to keep the look and feel close to that, so existing customers would recognize the settings. But it's very intuitive. Entering text is just as simple as typing, changing the colors. You can highlight the text, change the color to whatever you like. Of course, this being only 3 colors, you only have the 3 options. But within the next, I'd say, month, we will be releasing an RGB display that will allow you to select initially up to 10 colors, but really the limit it's in the thousands. You can really select any color you like. Other things you might notice here, obviously we can adjust the font size and the style of the font, whether it be standard, bold, or wide. We can also make the text blink if we want. We can also make the message rotate if we want with the rotate mode under mode. We can also insert time or date, or of course our variables, whether it be an alpha variable or a numeric variable. We'll take a better look at that here in a second or two. Or we can insert what we call custom characters, which is basically a bitmap. So if you have multiple or other languages, you can create bitmaps for those languages and import them as symbols. So if we wanted to just demonstrate that, here I have some symbols, libraries that have already been preloaded. So here we have Chinese. I select the character that I want, I select the size that I want, and then I click the insert button, and it drops it into the editor. Now you'll see that it drops just this little star wheel icon, but if you hover over it, you see the actual a snapshot of the actual character itself. Now if we want to see what it really is going to look like on the display, we will go to the preview mode. So we'll click the preview button, and this is basically what the message will look like on the display, including the size and dimension. So I'm not going to save this edit, so I'm going to go ahead and navigate away from the screen. And now we'll demonstrate how to trigger messages via the PLC. So right now we we're displaying message 1. If we want to display message 2, it's just as simple as changing the value of the message tag. And now we have message 2 showing up, and you'll also notice that I have an embedded numeric variable that's just tied to an internal timer on the controller. And if we were to go back, oops, I closed it by accident here. Sorry about that. If we were to go back into the InView comms and take a better look at the message 2 that has the embedded variable. So if we look at that under the editor, here you can see it just drops a value of 0. If it were an alpha variable, meaning alpha numeric, it drops question marks and a number of question marks depending on the size of the character string that you selected. But as far as adding a variable, it's very simple. You place the cursor in the screen where you want it, and you click the insert variable, and you get the little dialog box, and you select whether it's a numeric, meaning it's going to be just a straight integer value, or alphanumeric, meaning it's basically a string. And here you can set the string length and the variable. Now you can have up to, I believe it's up to 200 variables defined that the display will hold internally. That of course is updated using the controller. So if we were to go back now and look at just the routine that handles the actual update of message 2, which has the variable, you can see I'm just reading from this timer, and every time the timer updates, I'm writing to the sign using the numeric var add-on instruction. So not a lot of code, just quite simple. If we want to switch to alphanumeric, I'm going to go ahead and do that here. If I go back to the main routine, and I want to now toggle from a decimal value or decimal or numeric variable to an alpha variable, and we want to also display the message with the alpha variable, which is message 3. And if we go back to the display, so here we can see message 3 with the alpha var. It's echoing back a numeric value that we pushed in from a timer, but if we go back to the controller, we can go to the alpha variable routine. I can go in and actually put whatever text I want. So this will probably get truncated. I think I don't have enough characters defined on the display, but we'll give it a try here. Whoops. Well, anyways, you see you see that the values changed up here. That put the word world here, but if I wanted to, I can actually go in and automate it by just simply passing the value from a timer. So if I toggle this on, we'll start writing just the value from the timer. So again, we only have the two types. Either it's a numeric variable on the display or an alphanumeric. If, for example, you wanted to display a floating point value, you would use the alpha variable to do that, and just simply write it as a string to the sign. So if we go back to the sign here, you can see the value updating here. Okay, so let's go back to the display, or excuse me, the comms module, and let's just create a new message here. Okay, so I'm going to select my font size, and I want this to be rotating, and I want the color to be green. Green. And let's go 24 fancy. And if we want a quick preview as to what this will look like on the screen, hit the preview button, hit the play, you see the animation. So that's what we should expect with the message. I'm going to save the message. And now in order to update the sign, we got to download this new message to the sign. So I'm going to click the download button. And now we see the sign blink momentarily as the new message is downloaded. And now with the controller, if I go in and trigger that message 4, go back to the comms module, or excuse me, the display, we can now see the new message that we created scrolling across the screen. So pretty straightforward. It's not a lot of work involved as far as the controller is concerned. But like I said, even in the next 3 or 4 weeks, we'll make it even easier by adding the easy tags. So there won't be any need for the add-on instructions. It'll just be a block of tags. Let me look at or show you some of the other capabilities of the comms module here. In addition to being able to define the messages themselves, we also have some maintenance tasks that allow us to, for example, if you did have an existing message file that was created with the old IMS software, the old Rockwell IMS software, we allow that the user to import those messages, so you don't have to recreate them with the new comms module. You just basically import the file and it drops all the messages in. And the same is true for custom characters. Again, we can import them from the old IMS software, or import them from the new comms module if they were exported using one of these two functions here. We can also back up the entire configuration of the comms module, including all of the messages and all of the network settings by simply clicking this button. It will create the backup file and then give us a browse option to where we can save the file. So, and then if we were to hit the save button, we get the browse option and we would dump it somewhere on the PC. And like I mentioned before, we can also update the firmware, so as we add new functionality to the comms module, the user can upgrade the comms module in the field. Here you can see we also have the ability to reset to factory defaults, reboot, or of course change the login password, which the default is Spectrum. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and open it back up for questions to see if anybody has any questions.
I do. I guess if you were laying out your screen, you just kind of showed one item on the screen at a time. If you're going to lay out like a production grid, let's say, multiple items on almost like an Excel spreadsheet, how would you go about?
You mean like so if you wanted to display like 5 lines or 4 lines with variables?
Yep.
Yep, I got you. Yeah, you could go in and let's see, add a message here. And you have a couple different options. You can create either a header that has the variable, if it's the same header that across multiple screens, or if you want, you got to select the correct font size to get the number of lines that you want. So let's say I got flow on one line, insert a variable, submit. Then on the next line we have temperature, and that's variable 2, let's say. And then variable 3, and another. And let me see if I can get that all to fit on in 7 high here. Nope, I gotta go to 5. So if you pick a font that's too large, and it will bounce between 2 screens basically. But to get them all to fit here, we want to go back, and I want them to be smaller font. Now we have everything on one screen here.
What about justifying the text?
We should be able to do that. Is that what you were looking for?
Yeah, probably also justify the variable, to the longest. So you probably have to space it over to where it's all justified, like your variable would be right justified.
Right. Right. I don't know if I'm not sure if we allow the user to write justify. I think we only give the 2 options. But now with the RGB display, we've added more capability as far as justification, and we also added the ability to rotate not only left but also right. So some languages read in the other way around. So we added that capability as well. With the old sign, for example, if it was Chinese, they would have to flip the sign upside down. But with the new RGB display that's coming out in the next month here, they just select the rotate option. So.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. Heath, did you have any other questions? Because I had a couple myself.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it doesn't. Yeah, multiple controllers, or does it just communicate with one controller at a time?
It just communicates with one controller at a time. At one time, we were thinking about adding the case of multiple controllers, but then, what do you do in the case where you got 2 controllers trying to control what message is being displayed? So we decided that it just didn't make sense to us. But if you had, let's say, multiple controllers and variables coming from multiple controllers, as long as those values are written to the controller that's actually configured to communicate with the comms module, you could read in all those values.
Sure.
But, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that might be something we revisit down the road if we get enough requests for it.
Sure. And then also on your communication setup screen, you showed logics. What other choices were there?
Oh, yeah, no problem. I'm going to go ahead and not save that. Let's go to want to save, go to PLC. Yeah, so we have, of course, compact logics, micro logics, PLC5, SLC, and what we call pass-through. Pass-through basically turns the box into a Ethernet to serial converter. So we have cases that, especially with the old IMS software, there was the capability or an ActiveX component that allowed the user, and a data API for that matter, that allowed the user to write messages directly to the sign using an application. So if they wanted to develop an application of their own rather than use a PLC,
Yeah.
this is what you would do. Now with the old comms module, you actually had to buy a separate comms module to do that. So here we just added the functionality to the existing comms module.
What about, and I know I'm bouncing around, but if I had a value, how would I go about setting thresholds if I wanted to, let's say if the flow rate was above 50 and I wanted that to go red? Can I change that?
Yeah, what you could. Yeah, what you would do to accomplish that would be to I keep wanting to click on that for some reason, but you would create one message in one color and create the same message in a different color, and depending on the threshold, you trigger the appropriate message. So so let's say we had, excuse me, high with whatever our variable is. Right, and I save that. And then I create a new message.
So in other words, Jeff, what you're saying there is that you're going to handle it in the logic, and you're going to use some type of a compare or an equal to, less than equal to, greater than equal to instruction that says, hey, look, if the value is this, if your variable value is this, take enter this value, this message number into the display.
Exactly. So
okay.
it'll bounce between them. Now it'll look totally seamless to the user. It'll just all of a sudden change. So in other words, if I would have kept the text exactly the same, you would only see the color change.
Yeah, but that's also, is there a limit to the number of messages we can have inside the display?
There is. It's quite large though. It's over 2,000.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's based on the partition size. So, you know, however, how many characters in length the message is
Yeah.
dictate, you know, the partition size. So if the partition size is quite large, then, you know, it may be less than 2,000. But believe me, we've never had anybody complain about not being able to store enough messages in the sign. And even if they were to somehow exceed the limit of the sign, you can actually, from the controller, create the message on the fly using the native language of the sign. So,
any plans to take and change that over to where you can change just the variable, basically put some expression building inside the InView message display to be able to take and monitor and control that?
yeah, absolutely. That might be something that we decide down the road. I mean, one thing that, you know, we're doing this in stages. So when we took over the line from Rockwell, the first thing we had to do is redesign the comms module because they were obsoleting all the hardware. So we did that. That was step one. And step two was, you know, we want to try to make it as easy as possible for the user to configure it, because the one thing about the old setup that wasn't done quite well is the old IMS software was very flaky. It was Windows XP compliant only, you know, blah blah blah. So that's why we came up with this web-based interface. The next step will actually be to change how the comms module communicates with the sign. Right now, it's done over a serial interface, but eventually, you know, we want to switch over to DVI. And once we do that, then we'll have complete graphical control over the sign. And then we can roll in all kinds of stuff, not only animated graphics, but also, you know, being able to change the colors and things, specific elements, without having to actually switch the message. So it'll be totally different when we go that, you know, get to that point in time. So.
Gotcha. Heath, did you have any other questions?
Yeah, back on, if you'll go back to your Logix program,
Sure.
just to kind of, if you'll flip over to your Studio 5000 program, looking at that, I'm just trying to get a feeling for it. So, you know, if we had the example just a few minutes ago where you had multiple variables on one, you know, one screen or one display,
right?
I assume that I'm going to have multiple add-on instructions or multiple. Am I going to have?
No,
what's that ladder
actually,
look like?
yeah,
Am I going to have more of those?
no, you would use just because this routine right here, the message routine, is all that is used to change the messages. So really, all you would be changing is this decimal value. So I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Okay. All right. I
Yeah.
understand. So you're going to bring up the screen. And what about you had those other, for example, those other ladder files? I guess you were just using that for demo purposes, variable. So click on there.
Yeah.
So I would have multiple of these though. Yeah, to move the values into these spots, right?
Well, it's same kind of scenario. You would use the same chunk of ladder to write to the different variables. You change the variable number here. Right now we're actually writing to variable 0, which is what's being displayed on the message 2. But let's say you had multiple variables. As soon as this one finishes updating, you could have in your logic, increment this variable to the next variable, refresh, and and have it do kind of a round robin thing.
That's kind of messy. I might like an example of that one day. Or
Yeah, no.
I guess that could be fixed. That's pretty dirty.
Well, that's because of the limitation of the ASCII string. Again, this will all become easier when we switch over to easy tags, which is just 3 or 4 weeks away. We're only changing just the value. So you change the value and select the trigger. So if we go back to var, which that's all being done by this add-on instruction. So anytime this value changes, it triggers the add-on instruction to execute and updates the variable. So right, I mean, you obviously have to be careful not writing 2 variable values at the same time, because you can't do that. They have to be in sequential order, or not in sequential order, but they have to be one after the other. You got to write one value and then go to the next. But the display holds that data until it's written to again.
So where did the 14295 value come from?
From the timer here. Yeah, let me turn this back on here.
Okay, I see it. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so now we got so every time the timer updates, it changes the value or writes to the display. But again, on the display side, it's pretty seamless because it's able to handle up to 200 variables. It's able to store that on the display. So whatever value it was held in last, it'll hold that until it's updated.
So within your add-on instruction, when you go to import that in, are the tags new _var _data, and then var number and display address and var data, are those tags already created as part of the import?
It is.
You're just going to use those? Okay.
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
But again, with the easy tags, excuse me, with the easy tags, all of this logic will just basically disappear, and you'll only be left with just a handful of variables.
Okay.
To trigger the messages. So rather than having to rely on the controller to create the string that actually gets written to the sign, that will be done by the comms module, and you're only passing just the raw data values. I want message 6, I want variable 10, and so on.
So are you going to have an array of the 200 variable data, like a
yeah, we actually
a tag that will be called variable data, and it'll have 200 elements inside of it, and then the user will just take and put in whatever. They'll just do a move instruction into variable 2, bracket 2, and they'll move that value in, and then all they got to do is trigger it, and boom, it's good. Is that how it's going to work?
Yeah, it's something like that. Actually, I have a prototype on the wall here that I can show you real quick with the new.
What do you think about that? Wouldn't that be a good thing where you've got your 200 alpha, your 200 variable data tags, and you just populate the value that you want in there and just move it over?
That sounds easier. Yeah.
Yeah, so here's the classic mode, which was what we've been using up to this point.
Yep.
And then there'll be an option for easy, and basically we generate these tags automatically. Now we give the user, of course, they can go in and change the tag name to whatever they like.
Uh-huh.
But once this table is done and they're happy with what they see, they submit. That writes the, so now we're using this block of tags on the comms module. And then we give them this export option, which actually creates the CSV file with these tag names so that they can just directly import that into the controller so they don't have to create those manually. And then all we're doing,
So,
go
go
ahead.
ahead, Jeff. No, you're good.
Okay, what I was going to say, all they have to do, for example, if they want to change the message, if they want to trigger a priority message, for example, they would write a numerical value to this tag and then toggle the trigger bit, and that would change the message. And the same is true for the variable.
Okay. And then your alpha variable value strings has a length of 16.
Right.
That is because we got 16 different variables that we could take, and we could put data into those 16, and you're going to have an array of 16, and then they could populate whatever data they wanted to, trigger that variable number, and that shows up on the screen.
Yeah, this is actually going to change. What we decided to add here is we're going to give the user two options for the alpha var. We're going to give them a standard string. So on a control objects, a standard string is default 82 characters in length. So we'll give that as the default option, which will handle, probably 99% of all the customers out there. They're not going to have a string longer than 82 characters. In the event that they do, we will also give them an option to change the string type to a single int, and then they can set the length to whatever number of characters they like, up to the limit that the display can handle. The beauty with going with the string is that basically you're just all you got to do is write the alpha string. If you go with the single int, then you got to do a copy from a string to the single int in order to pass that data along. But still, it's, and the reason we did it that way, we juggled the idea of, giving the user the ability to create a custom string data type. The only problem with that is then we're exporting two files, not only the CSV file, but then we got to export the data type file. So we figured, it's really one line of code to do the copy. So really, we wanted to keep the exporting and importing simplified, and we decided that that's the route we're going to take.
Okay, so so will the user have an array of, like a string array that they can take and just put values into and then just trigger it, I guess is the question.
Exactly. That's exactly the way it'll work. Yeah.
Okay, that's cool. That'll be very nice, because then the user knows that if they're working with and also inside the software here, is it going to be 0 through 199, or is it going to be 1 through 200?
I'm sorry, I lost you there.
Inside the InView software, when they go to choose a variable value that they want to show up on a given message screen,
right.
Is it going to start off at 0, variable 0 through 199, since we got 200 of them, or is it going to start off at 1 through 200?
No, it'll start with 0 to 199.
Okay, so good.
Yeah.
So that way, inside the controller, if they're doing variable numeric variable data and they're looking for 0, the first one, they know that it's going to be 0 through 199, just the same as it is in the software.
Right, exactly. So yeah, there's no offset there.
Yeah, that's good.
It lines right up. Yeah, so we think that this is, before, obviously the end goal is to get to DVI, but right now, we can't change all the displays all at once. So as far as the technology on how they communicate with the comms module, so that's something we'll add down the road. But in the meantime, we wanted to make it as easy as possible. So we wanted to get all of that gobbledygook out of the controller and put it in the comms module. Now, the other benefit here is the fact that if you notice on the controller side, we can only write a numeric value or an alpha variable at a time. We can't do both simultaneously. Well, that will change when we switch over to easy tags, because the comms module will actually queue that data. So the PLC could be hammering off all these different both alpha var and numeric variables to the comms module, and it's going to take that and serially send it to the sign. So you won't have to worry about making sure that you're not overriding one variable with another before it gets finished updating. We'll handle that on the comms module side.
Okay. I got a couple other questions. Number one, whenever I get this thing out of the box, separate DHCP, does it have a static IP in it that I need to set my PC to? How does that work?
Yeah, it does. It has a static IP. When you go to when it comes out of the box, this address here, the Ethernet 1 port, would be set up by default for 192.168.1.100.
Okay.
So your PC would have to be in that network,
Okay.
and then you could go in and make a change. Yep.
Okay. The other question would be on the page that you showed where you choose pass-through as your communication type or your controller type or whatever. There, yeah, your message server type. When you I'm assuming that's for Ethernet TCP/IP, which looks like it's grayed out. So that would be your other communication protocol that you could use, kind of like what the InView could do before. It could either do CIP. If you bought the Ethernet IP version of it, it would do CIP, or you could have it. You would buy the other option, which would be Ethernet TCP/IP.
Correct. Correct. So before we had you had to buy two separate pieces of hardware. Now it's all encompassed in one unit.
But it's only one or the other. It's not both.
Yeah, you can't. Right. You can't have it both communicating to a controller and TCP/IP pass-through simultaneously. No.
Okay. All right. Any option to add in Modbus TCP as another protocol?
Funny you should ask. Yeah, that's coming with the next build. You can see in this prototype we already have it.
Okay. All right. Okay. Yeah. So that wasn't on the other screen that we were looking at just a second ago,
No,
was it?
no. This is what's currently released. This version here, and this is the prototype.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. I can't think of any other questions for myself. Looks pretty straightforward.
Okay.
I think once that next release comes out, where you've got the ability just to put the variable data that you want in, go in, trigger the message number that you want, it'll be pretty nice, because then you really won't have to do anything, because you can have movement instructions going on constantly to your variable data, whether it's alphanumeric or alpha, or numeric only, and populate that information and just trigger the variable number, and you should be good to go, right?
Yep, you got it. Yeah. And so, I mean, we would have loved to have that initially, but it was just, it was quite a lot of work that we had to do to not only redesign the hardware, but it's just, we planned it in stages, so we're just to the next step here. So.
Yep. No, that's great. I think it looks good. What do you think, Keith?
No, I like it. It's a step in the right direction.
Great.
Is this something that you guys are going to be with the new release? Is this something you're going to be showing at Automation Fair? And I know, of course, you'll have it there, but will you have any technical sessions around that?
I'm not sure what they're doing for technical sessions, but definitely we will have kiosks there with the new comms module. Absolutely.
Yeah,
So
in showing signs like this in the past to my customers and stuff, it's the ease of use that sells them. It's not the size, it's not the
yeah,
lettering, the different colors. It's this user interface. I mean, it's, you know, the easier you can make it to be able to populate those screens with data. That's what it's all about. So I would encourage you to continue to do that.
Yeah, no, that's the goal here. Because one of the main complaints with the old IMS software was that it was difficult to use and not intuitive. So we did our best to try to make this as easy as possible. So the easy tags is just the next step, and then, like I said, eventually we'll get to our DVI interface where we can basically open the gates to pretty much doing anything on the display.
Do you anticipate all that being ready for Automation Fair?
Not the DVI, but definitely easy tags. And like I said, we're only about 3 weeks away. We're in final testing right now, so it's not far off.
You don't ever plan to incorporate all this as part of an add-on profile inside of Logix, do you? Where you
Well,
just drop in.
Yeah, that's been discussed. Yeah, we would have to change it so that it would support a Class 1 connection, but that's absolutely doable. I mean, basically, the comms module is a Linux computer, so we can definitely add that capability as we go forward. But as it stands today, no, we don't have that capability now. But definitely, that's something we could add in the future.
Because that would be something.
I would love to see that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that would make it exactly.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, that was going to say that would just make it that much easier. So definitely that's been discussed, and I can't imagine that we wouldn't do that. Let me put it to you that way.
Yeah. Yeah, where you would just have a list of your messages that you want. You type in your messages inside of the the module properties page. Put your variables in there. You know what in some form or fashion. But associate those with the backing tags that get created, and you're good to go. It just becomes, like you